Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC. Today, our featured guest is Colonel Rich Graham, retired from the U.S. Air Force, famous for piloting SR-71, the Blackbird. The number to call is 469-307-1642. We are glad you are joining us. Richard has written several books after he retired from the U.S. Air Force. The first book was SR-71 Revealed, the Inside Story, then SR-71 Blackbird Stories, Tales and Legends, and the third one was Flying the SR-71 Blackbird on a Secret Operational Mission. And the last one, recently he has completed the complete illustrated history of Blackbird, the world's highest and fastest airplane. Richard, welcome to the program.
I'm glad to be here, Ravi. Glad you invited me.
All right, very good. Now, the book is available at, all these books are available at Amazon.com, and also you can get a autographed copy of this book if you write to him by email. Rich, can you go ahead and give your email address to our audience?
It's habu5@verizon.net.
Okay, it is HABU Habu5 at Verizon.net. Very good, Richard. Welcome again. And Richard, before we get right to the Blackbird, our audience would like to know more about you personally. For example, where you were born, what was your early career about, what did you do for a living, and what are you doing now, and what's in the future for you?
Well, Ravi, I started out, my love for aviation started when I was a young teenager working at a local airport in Pennsylvania. I was out there just cutting grass and waxing airplanes and washing them and pumping up airplanes with gas and changing oil and stuff like that. And just a general handyman. And my father turned out to be a Navy Corsair pilot flying the F-4 Corsair. And he also had his instructor's rating, and one day I asked him if he would like to teach me how to fly while I was working at the airport. So that was my start as a teenager.
Okay.
And I got my private license then, and I went to college for 4 years, and I graduated. I was in college. I went to ROTC in the Air Force, and I joined the Air Force in 1964. Came aboard as a second lieutenant, and started pilot training in the T-37, then the T-33. Graduated with my wings in '65. Stayed on as an instructor in the T-37 for the next 3.5 years, and then Vietnam was cranking up pretty good, and they were looking for a lot of volunteers, so I volunteered for Vietnam. And I'm very fortunate to get selected for the F-4 Phantom, and I flew the F-4 in Vietnam for a year. And after the year was up, my follow-on assignment was to Okinawa, Japan, where I got into the F-4 Wild Weasel mission, and that in turn got me back into Vietnam because the Wild Weasels were running short. The F-105 Weasels couldn't keep up with the mission, so we came over and augmented them for another 6 months of the Vietnam War, and flew 210 combat missions in Vietnam total, and ended up with 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 19 Air Medals in doing that. Very, very exciting time of my life, that year and a half in Vietnam. Then I saw the SR-71 over at Okinawa flying around the skies, and I thought it was time for a change for airplanes, and I volunteered, which you have to do, for the SR-71 program, and I got accepted, and I showed up at Beale Air Force Base in Northern California in June of 1974 to start SR-71 training. Then I flew the SR for the next 7 years, and then they asked me one day if I would like to be the squadron commander of the SR-71 outfit, which, by the way, doesn't fly the primary airplane. So when you select to be the squadron commander of the SRs, you don't get to fly it anymore. So I had a dilemma. I had to decide whether to continue flying or take the squadron, and I decided to take the squadron since I'd already flown it for 7 years already. So then I was a squadron commander of the SR-71 outfit for a year and a half, and then I went on to Air War College for a year, and then I got sent to the Pentagon for 4 years. And after my 4 years in the Pentagon, I made full colonel, and I got an assignment back to Beale Air Force Base as the vice wing commander at Beale, and did that for a year. And then in 1987, I took over the wing as the wing commander at Beale Air Force Base and commanded the wing. Retired out of the Air Force at Beale in 1989, and I was very fortunate the airlines were hiring older retired military pilots. So I joined American Airlines in 1987, and 89, and flew with American Airlines for 13 years. Retired out of American Airlines in 2002, and since then I've been instructing and teaching instruments and basic flying up at McKinney Airport for 2 flying clubs. And that's where I'm at today. I've been writing the books and doing a lot of speeches around the United States and overseas on the SR-71 as well.
Oh, I see. So the future is pretty much writing books and giving speeches and educating people about your career and what went on in the U.S. Air Force. And yeah.
Yeah, there's a big fascination out there in the world about the SR-71. So the books that I wrote sort of, get people to ask me to come and give talks. So that sort of spawned itself just by writing the books on the airplane.
That's pretty amazing because I did put this information on the Facebook on my page. I have a Dr. RC radio show page. And there is a tremendous response. In fact, there were more than 600 likes between yesterday and today. Now, it's very hard to get any kind of like on Facebook, unless you know somebody. But these are all complete strangers, and 600 of them.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing stuff. So
Yeah.
even if I do something on Facebook for a couple of a couple of little postings, I get one or two likes, and that too from only from my friends and
Yeah.
relatives and nothing else. But I got 600 plus likes on Facebook when I advertised your program for today's show. Very
Yeah.
good. So okay, so that's pretty fascinating career, very exciting. And I want to tell our audience, I also had a couple of several hours of training with Rich Graham in McKinney Airport, and it was always a pleasure to have you beside me to train me on some of those missions. Well, those missions are nothing compared to what you had, but it's a big mission for me each time I get on those airplanes. Very good.
Well,
Let's get back to the SR-71 program. The first thing that I want to ask you is um, why it was built. Why did they build these SR-71 high reconnaissance airplanes, and what is the purpose behind them?
well, the purpose of it was a follow-on to the U-2 aircraft. If you if your listeners can recall, on May 1st of 1960, Gary Powers got shot down over Russia flying a U-2,
I am very familiar with
and
that. Yes. Uh-huh.
that incident prompted Kelly Johnson and Lockheed Skunk Works to build an airplane that would go higher and faster than the U-2 to avoid enemy missiles and SAM. So that was the outgrowth of the SR-71. Since Gary Powers got shot down.
I see. Okay, so now the question is, well, let's get to the speed and altitude. What speed and what altitude did you reach?
Top speed of the airplane is about 3.2 Mach, no faster than 3.2. We were allowed to accelerate to 3.3 Mach if we ever felt we were in harm's way, and by doing so would get us out of harm's way, we were allowed to accelerate to 3.3. The actual speed limit of the airplane is a compressor inlet temperature. Once our gauge read 427 degrees Celsius as a temperature at the compressor, that's as fast as we were allowed to go. And it usually came out to about 3.2 Mach. Altitudes, generally, with a full tank of gas, you'd level off at about 71,000 feet. And from then on, you'd cruise climb, and by the time you were done, you were up around 79, maybe 80,000 feet. It's good up to, all the performance charts on the airplane stopped at 90,000 feet. So we were good up to about, I've been personally up to 87,000 feet. But you're starting to run out of air, and this is an air-breathing engine, so you have to be real careful and pay attention to all your parameters the closer you get to 90,000.
Now tell me, Rich, how does it look like when you look at the Earth from 80 to 90,000 feet? How does it feel, and what do you look
Uh,
down there?
First of all, there's no atmosphere that we think of as normal pilots down here, like clouds and stuff like that. So you don't have to contend with anything. There's no wind, there's no bumps. It's nice and smooth. Uh, the strongest winds I've ever seen are probably around 5 or 10 knots at the most, except for one part of the world up in the Barents Sea. But mostly 5 or 10 knots at the most. And the curvature of the Earth is very discernible. You can see a good curvature of the Earth. And directly above you, from about 45 degrees above the horizon line, the stars are out all the time in the daytime.
Oh,
So a good
really?
view all the time.
Even is now where is the sun in relation to the stars? Can you see the sun at the same time or no?
See the what?
The sun, because the sun is. Are you talking about at 45-degree angle? You are able to see all the stars. What
Oh, there's
about
no
sun?
problem.
What about
Yeah, the
sunlight?
sun. Yeah, the sun. You can see it just like normal. You can see it on airliners. It's more brilliant up there. Everything up there is more brilliant. At nighttime, when you fly an SR across the poles, let's say you're flying over to England, and the aurora borealis, the northern lights are just so brilliant. They're dancing outside the cockpit, all these deep purples and blues, that it just feels three-dimensional at night with all the stars out. You feel like you could just sort of reach out and touch them, that they're just a couple miles off the nose or off to the side, all these stars, because they're very, very brilliant.
Absolutely incredible view then.
Very, very nice view. Very
Yeah.
good view.
Well, then the question is, the sun was not able to overpower the stars because the sun is right there, but you are still able to see the stars, huh? That is pretty amazing because in the daytime here on the Earth we can't see any star.
No, you can't hear, but up at 80,000, like I say, if you put you about 45 degrees above the horizon line,
Uh huh.
all the way around in a 360-degree circle, all the stars are out up there in the daytime.
Okay, so the next question is, you are able to achieve about 80 to 90,000 feet altitude and also 3.2 Mach. Now, when the enemy aircraft and the enemy missiles, what speed they were able to travel in the 70s?
The which airplane?
The enemy aircraft, the Russian aircraft.
Oh, the enemy aircraft.
Yeah.
About the closest airplane that we had a threat the day when I was flying it was the MiG-25, but it turned out not to be the threat that we thought. If everyone remembers, many years ago, a Russian pilot called Viktor Belenko defected with a MiG-25 into Japan, and we reverse engineered that aircraft and found out it really didn't have the capability that we thought it did. It was good for about 2.8 Mach, and if they went above 2.8, it trashed their engine so bad they had to do an engine change on it. So it was a very ineffective platform to try and shoot us down.
Okay, so in other words, they would not be able to catch up with you.
Not only catch up, but the fire control system couldn't make the resolution to fire a missile at us. And a lot of people don't realize it, but those air-to-air missiles, those little fins on the missiles that maneuver it, are designed for thicker air around 35 to 40,000 feet. And if you have those missiles with those fins trying to maneuver at 80, 90,000 feet, the air is so thin up there that they can't make a turn at all. They're just so thin. It won't do
Oh,
it.
so but can the missiles reach up to 80,000?
Uh, yeah, there's some SAM, some surface-to-air missiles that can do it. Air-to-air missiles, very doubtful that their fire control system and radar would even be able to keep up with the computations to intercept us. But surface-to-air missiles were probably more of a threat, like the SA-5s and SA-7s.
Okay. Now, what is the speed at which these missiles were traveling from ground to air, or air to air? They still won't be able to catch up with you. Is that correct?
It depends. First of all, they have to know you're coming. They have to find you. And this airplane was very stealthy. It had a very small radar cross section. So if they find you, let's say they find you, and then they can lock onto you, which is another part of the equation, then their computers have to solve the problem of where in space is my missile going to meet up with the SR. So they have to plan ahead. And the computations for the computers are very difficult to keep up with our speed and make that happen.
So naturally, the American Army, I mean, U.S. Air Force was far advanced in 1970s, as it is now, so that the enemies are really not in a position to go after the SR-71 Blackbird. Very
Well,
interesting.
I'm just the only thing I can vouch for are the days when I flew it up till 1990. I knew what was out there and what the threat was. What's there now today, I would have no idea what the capabilities are today, to be honest with you.
Okay, that's fair. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC. Our featured guest is Colonel Rich Graham, who flew the SR-71 Blackbird on several missions, and he is with us. We are reaching the first break for the first quarter of our live show. And the number to call is 469-307-1642. And we will be right back. Richard, stay online, huh?